Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Doctors in the House Health Show on 99.1 FM, WUJM, St. Petersburg Community Radio. We have an excellent program for you tonight. Please stay tuned. WUGM St. Petersburg. Just in case you didn't hear me, I'm Dr. Morency. Welcome to the Doctors in the House. This is your health show, a program about wellness, mental health, and disease prevention. And we have an excellent show again for you tonight. Topic of the day is ultra-processed food and your health. Do you really know what you are eating? And let's get going. Now, the fundamental issue I want to discuss tonight is a question that most of my patients during my career had asked me many times. Why isn't there any cure for my disease, my hypertension, my diabetes? Do I have to take medication for the rest of my life? Well, my simple answer to them was the fact that you have chronic disease. Now, this is not an answer that I was satisfied with, and they didn't either, but that's the best I have to explain why, because it's a legitimate question. Well, the fact is in the United States, and slowly in the rest of the civilized world, there is such thing as a chronic disease. I put it this way, chronic preventable disease. Chronic disease are among the most prevalent, meaning widespread and costly health condition in the United States. Over half of all Americans suffer from at least one chronic disease, and close to 30% suffer from multiple chronic disease, with the highest rate found in women, non-Hispanic white adult, and those folks over 65. Now, I can tell you how many patients I treated who basically take more than 10 medications. They have the whole series of disease that they have to fight, they have to take medication for. So chronic disease is the usual norm, you could say, in the end of 20th century and then now in the 21st century. Chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes are the leading cause of death and disability in the United States. Also, the leading driver of the United States, almost $4 trillion in annual healthcare costs. So, what's behind those chronic diseases? Well, the simple answer is, there are many factors. But there's one factor that really stands and lead the pack. It is obesity. Obesity is a modern crisis. Back in the 1960s and early 70s, only 13% of the U.S. adult population and 5% of children were obese. Today, there are about 17% of our children are obese. And the U.S. adult obesity rate is a whopping 42%, just 40 years. So the national adult obesity rate has been increasing gradually since the late 70s and has continued to steadily rise to the point that by 1997, the World Health Organization had declared obesity an epidemic. And the United States followed suit by 1999. Part of it is because obesity was found to be associated with majority of chronic disease. And as I said earlier, it's the leading cause of death in the United States and worldwide. And it's associated with disease like diabetes, which, by the way, is the fastest growing chronic disease in the world. Heart disease, stroke, some type of cancer. And obesity is also linked with many other diseases: gallbladder disease, sleep apnea, breathing problem, autoimmune condition, poor mental health outcome, and also reduced quality of life. Well, let me just clarify something. this show is not about obesity, but I wanted to set the stage to explain what's going on. Something is causing this epidemic of obesity. What is it? What's behind this? All of a sudden, just the rapid increase in obesity. Well, let's go to some of the reasons given. Number one reason given is increased calorie intake tied with reduced physical activity. Well, we're eating too much and we don't exercise. Kind of makes sense, but I think it's more complicated than that, okay? Well, then we look at genetic factors. What about genetic factors? Does that account for the obesity epidemic? According to CDC analysis, in most obese people, no single genetic cause can be identified. It is not as simple as that. And it's been shown already by many big, large studies that when it comes to chronic disease, things like longevity, lifestyle factors may be more important than genetic, and has been found to be more important than genetic. So there are more to it than that. So along this debate and wondering what's going on, finally, somebody determined, well, a group, one of the major factors that has been hidden in plain sight is finally being considered. You see, there's diet and there's nutrition. Those two should not be confused. So if you're eating a lot of food, you get more calorie in, but you are not eating nutritious food, because just by diet, meaning it's what you eat, but whether your body is getting what it needs, that's a totally different story. So somebody wrote a commentary about this fascinating point. And I find it really fascinating. So I'm just going to quote here. The role of diet in the United States epidemic obesity is obviously a major problem, but it's also complex. Over the years, consumers have been sent wildly mixed messages when it comes to what to eat and how much. In one hand, larger portion, processed packaged food, drive-through meal are branded as classically American. This is us. It has to be fast, cheap, filling, and delicious. On the other hand, we are spending billions of dollars annually on weight loss scheme, from diet book, exercise and gym, and multiple weight loss options, including things like last resort surgery like Lipo-Bane, liposuctions, and gastric bypass. It's no wonder we are looking for fast food and fast weight loss option at the same time. So this schizophrenic relationship with food is easy to explain according to the person in terms of marketing scheme. Because while we're talking about all this stuff, this too much sugar, too much fat, back and forth, decades of soda and TV dinner finally caught up with our waistline. And the U.S. diet industry grew bigger, faster, smarter. So we may be eating more, but what are we eating? All right? So we're going to take a look at how food is being transformed first. Okay. So what is this term? Food processing. According to NOVA, which is an organization responsible for food classification system, and this is a group that help people group different food according to the extent and the purpose of the processing system they're gonna use when the food, after the food have been separated from nature, because we get all those things naturally, okay, and then we do something to them. So based on the NOVA input, food processing involve physical, biological, and chemical process that occur after the food has been separated from nature, before they are consumed or used in preparation to make dishes and to serve meal. So they classify, this part is very important. They classify food into 4 different categories. Group 1 is unprocessed or minimally processed food. Those are your vegetable, fruit, fresh or frozen, dry fruit with no added sugar, honey, oil, grain, legume, your chickpeas and beans and lentils, meat, poultry, fish, seafood, eggs, milk without added sugar, plain yogurt with no added sugar, nuts and seed and spicy herbs, tea, coffee, and water. This is the minimally processed, because the food has to be processed to be eatable in most cases. Okay. Now the group 2, according to this group, has to do with the ingredient we use for cooking. We had to put iodine and salt because people were developing goiter. Salted butter, we have to use sugar and molasses from sugar cane or beets, extract honey from honeycomb, syrup from maple trees, vegetable oil crushed from olive or other seeds, butter and lard from milk and pork, starches extracted from corn and other plant, vegetable oil with added antioxidant, and vinegar with added preservative. Those are the ingredients that we have to use in cooking, in that process. Now, there's category 3. That's the average processing thing. This is processed food. In other words, canned vegetables, canned fruits, canned legume, fruit in syrup, salted or sugared nuts and seeds, salted cured or smoked meat, canned fish, lots of bread and cheese. So just because the food is processed doesn't necessarily mean all the nutrients are out of it. We're okay with that. I mean, they have to. This has to happen. Okay. But here's the category 4, group 4, the ultra processed food. Politely, I would say you can call this junk food. Those are your pop and food drinks. Sweetened yogurt, sweet and savory packaged snack, cookies, candies, cake mix, mass-produced packaged bread and bun, margarine, spread, breakfast cereal and energy bar, energy drink, instant soup and sauce and noodle, poultry and fish nuggets, hot dogs. Many of your ready-to-eat products, such as prepared pie, pre-prepared pasta, and pizza dishes. This is some of the thing we're eating now. They are convenient, they are fast. Okay? For instance, you get your corn out of your garden, right? You can eat the corn, or you can process it and make put in a can and sell it. Or you can ultra process it, having your corn chips. But by the time you get to the corn chip, all the nutrient, the vitamin, all the stuff that your body actually need for its own health, it's gone. Instead, by the time you get to corn chip, you got loads of sugar, loads of salt. Okay, same thing with an apple. You can eat your apple, clean it up, or you can have apple juice with sugar. Or ultra processed apple pie. So there is some level of mechanical processing that has to occur, such as you grinding your beef, eating vegetables, pasteurize your food, but that doesn't necessarily make the food unhealthy. But chemical processing, which involved in ultra processed food, is a different story. Most of the ultra processed food often only contain refined ingredient and artificial substances with little nutritional value. They tend to have added chemical flavoring, color, texture, lots of sweeteners. Those ultra-processed food are sometimes called cosmetic food as compared to whole food. So the question is, are those food bad for you? Well, one thing about ultra-processed food, they tend to taste good. And a lot of people may be addicted to those without knowing it. and they are often inexpensive. They usually contain ingredients that could be harmful if you consume it in excess, such as those saturated fat, those added sugar, the salt. When I say to somebody, what can I do for my blood pressure? I said, well, cut down the salt. I said, I don't eat any salt food. Well, you buy the stuff already loaded with salt. And they contain less dietary fiber, which help with digestive system and also prevent this high peak of sugar when your body consumes simple carbohydrate or those sugar. Okay. There's multiple studies been done to really prove how those things affect your body. One large study involving over 1,000 people showed that eating 10% more of ultra-processed food was associated with an above a 10% increase in the risk of cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, and cerebrovascular disease or stroke. Another study with 20,000 folks, really with control, well done, found that eating more than 4 servings of processed food daily was linked to an increased risk of all-cause mortality. So why those things are dangerous? Here's the 7 reasons. And listen to this carefully. Number 1 is the added sugar. Ultra-processed food tend to contain lots of added sugar, and they tell you that. And if you don't remember anything when you read your ingredient, remember high fructose corn syrup. All the drinks, Coke and cake and ice cream, this stuff is treacherous. And people have compared with regular sugar, but high fructose syrup is diagnosed so quickly, it's almost like giving yourself an injection of sugar directly into your bloodstream. And when you get that input and sugar into you, your insulin has to respond to lower this. Okay? And one of the things that happened, especially with this high fructose corn syrup, is that once the insulin brings the sugar down, guess what happened? You become very hungry and you want to eat. I experienced this way back a long time ago when I thought I had depression, because I eat my rich sugary diet, breakfast in the morning, orange juice and bread, and have some banana. By 10 o'clock, I am famished. And the reason being is that your insulin surge after you eat that load of sugar. And if it's overshoot, the sugar now become lower than it should be, and you start shaking, you start going through this stuff. And unless you eat something, you may pass out. So it's just the sugar response, the sugar response, okay? So added sugar. Number 2, artificial ingredient. Lots of those substances, you cannot even read them on the label. Don't know what they mean. Some of them are made to make sure the food is more palatable. And you have a lot of chemicals that are being used as preservative to keep the food from going bad quickly. Artificial coloring, chemical flavoring, texturing agent, all to make the food attractive to your senses, to your taste, so on and so forth. Now, when you hear when you read artificial flavor, this is a proprietary blend. The manufacturer don't have to tell you what it is exactly. Okay, it's just artificial flavor, artificial coloring. Number 3 is carbohydrate. We talk about carbohydrate, but high fructose corn syrup, it's just toxic. It's not just carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is what you call micronutrient. It's natural thing, like the 3 of micronutrient, the big thing you eat: a carbohydrate, protein, and fat. You need all this. Okay, but the carbohydrate, essential carbohydrate, come from whole food. When it's processed, we remove all this nutrient out of it. What's left is simple sugar, which, again, I told you, you get absorbed very quickly, which lead to spike in your blood sugar and insulin. And if you eat that in excess, you are at risk for type 2 diabetes. Number 4, ultra-processed food are very low in essential nutrient compared to whole food. We went over that before. Dietary fiber. You need fiber to slow down the absorption of carbohydrate when you eat your meal. Okay? It helps you feel more satisfied with fewer calories. Okay? And also fiber, in terms of your legume, it's like prebiotic for your guts because we have our normal natural bacteria that protect us. We call the microbiome. Okay, these are the things we depend to be able to digest fat. Okay, they use the fiber to actually process and stay healthy. So if you eat a meal depleted of fiber, your bacteria are actually starving, and there are competition between good bacteria and bad bacteria in your gut. So if you deplete your good bacteria, cardiovascular system is affecting, your mental health is affecting because we actually produce some of those neurotransmitters that goes to the brain to treat depression and anxiety. So there's a lot of effect of this. The other thing that those ultra-processed food, they provide you with very quick calorie. Because you have to they make the food so easy, you can chew them and swallow them easily so you can eat more of this in shorter period of time. So you consume more calorie because it takes more to make you feel full. And you get, after that piece of cake, by the time you go to the door, you said, come on, let me go back and get a second piece. They stimulate your appetite. Okay? So it's a problem. The other problem is quick fat. Trans fat, and you got to read those labels. We've been after the trans fat because most of the processed food, ultra processed food, are high in this healthy, cheap fat, which is inexpensive and durable. Actually, the manufacturers of food create the artificial trans fat by adding hydrogen to the liquid vegetable oil, making them more solid. What does trans fat do? Increase inflammation. If you have cardiovascular disease, you're at risk. It raises your bad cholesterol, the LDL. It decreases your good cholesterol, the HDL, thus increasing your risk of heart attack and stroke and type 2 diabetes. So you need to really avoid those toxic oil. Instead, you might consider things like coconut oil or olive oil, which are safer. So in a nutshell, you could see the role that ultra-processed food have had in this epidemic of diet and chronic disease. So you don't have to really, it's not a mystery, it's not a magic, because we have industry that are dedicated to make this, to make it simple, to make it cheaper, but at the same token, a little more toxic because they are devoid of natural essential nutrient that our body learn to stay healthy. And if somebody tell you, is that why there's a type 2 diabetes is the fastest growing epidemic in the world? Yes, because everything from those added sugar thing, the fat, the salt, all those things are not necessarily healthy things to do. Okay, so what can we do? Let's see in the time we're remaining here. Obviously, everyone involved in health education, public health, those good folks, preventive health, they know the link already between chronic disease and obesity. And hopefully they've been able to connect all the dots to see the influence of those diet into our health. There's been many recommendations really created in good faith by those various health agencies, including the CDC, the World Health Organization, to help people navigate those health challenges. You know, we've been told over and over, and everybody remember, you got to integrate physical activity into people's daily life. You got to make sure that people have healthy food and beverage option available everywhere. We got to transform our marketing and messages about nutrition and activity. We got to start with the school, make the school a gateway to healthy diet and weight for the kids, okay? And we have to galvanize our employers and healthcare professionals to support, encourage the healthy lifestyle. Guess what? Those guidelines have been there, and they are as thoughtful as can be, they're well-meaning. But they remain predictably ineffective. The obesity epidemic is not getting better, actually. And the response, the marketing response, the diet scheme are projected to actually gross almost $300 billion a year in about 5 to 10 years. So we're doing all this stuff with nothing in return, essentially. Because studies are shown that all those people who've been on or some kind of diet or the other, after 5 years, they weigh 11 pounds more than they were originally. So it's money, 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 money. Now, very little time that I have, I'll tell you what the challenge is. The challenge is the fact that, as well-meaning as all those folks, our scientists, our healthcare providers, in trying to help us really integrating all this healthy habits, healthy things, the reality is these efforts are taking place in the backdrop of a corrupt economic and political system controlled by corporate money. And it's going to take much more than public health slogan and unfeasible guideline to tackle this issue. Let me share with you an article that I read, which was really, really impressive to me, because there's been a lot of research done on the tactics of those companies to get away with this. Okay, it was published in the British Medical Bulletin, March 2008. It's called "The Role of Food Industry in Health: Lesson from Tobacco." This is a quote. This is a summary. Across the world, the majority of processed food consumed each day is produced by only 10 huge multinational corporations. And they name some of them: Coca-Cola, Danone, General Mills, Kellogg, Mars, PepsiCo, Nestle, Kraft, Tyson Meat, so on and so forth. Actually, the revenue of those corporations annually, prior to COVID and even COVID, averages about $50 billion a year. And they are all over the world, multiple countries, okay? And what people don't realize is that the control and the influence of those companies is not really well recognized, and many people do not appreciate that every single of those corporations is legally obligated to focus on just one objective. Do you know what it is? Maximizing profit for its shareholder. So that corporate messaging about public health, the fact that you've been counseled constantly to focus on promoting the benefit of exercise as opposed to reducing the consumption of those junk food and sugary drinks to address the obesity epidemic, is just public relation and marketing to maximize sales. Another technique, quickly, the expensive research again done on the ideology of those corporate consumption complex and the hyper consumption across the modern world. The contemporary food market are structured just by corporate activity, and the resulting market promote processed food which are known and invariably to be less healthy than whole food. It's not a mystery, okay? Their effort at self-regulation are deceptively ineffective, and this is demonstrated by they have a lack of willingness to stop marketing to children and vulnerable population. Thus, in 2015, to conclude, Dr. Margaret Chan, who was the director then of the World Health Organization, was able to say, it is not just tobacco anymore, it is not just big food, big soda, and big alcohol. All these industries fear regulation because it harms their profit, and they are using the same tactic that have been used by the tobacco company, like focus group, lobby, lawsuit, promise of self-regulation, which doesn't work, and the industry-funded research that confuse the evidence and keep the public in doubt. Doubt is one of the major goals of these companies, and it's very effective. Lastly, the last tactic I'll share very quickly, it's called the MARSH, M-A-R-S-H. It stands for misinformation, attack, recruitment of ally, substituting ineffective policy, and heaps of money. The industries act to undermine any public health regulation which might threaten their profit. It's a deliberate tactic by those actors to delay, distract public health and policymakers from implementing those interventions that work best: regulation and taxation. In summary, I'm going to take 1 minute to summarize. Obviously, this is a very complicated subject because we are in it. We've been experiencing it, and it's not over. All I want to do is raise your awareness about the connection between the epidemic of chronic disease, such as type 2 diabetes, as an example, obesity, and the food we put in our body. It is not a random process, people. It's a deliberate process. Everybody makes money. Think of it this way. There's a chronic disease industry with big pharma, big insurance company. There's an obesity industry with weight loss industry, which is rampant, making big money. There's a big food, big drink industry, all making money while most of us are getting sicker. Please, just open your eyes, open your mind, open your eyes and see for yourself. Thank you very much, lady. I appreciate your patience. And if you really appreciate the show, please give us a call at 727-637-2416 for any feedback. Appreciate your patience.
This is Cara Festo Radio. 99 Gems, The Berg.